on First at 9 this Tuesday, the 13th of January 2026. Reforms on hold. Grade 6 education reforms postponed until 2027. Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya will continue as Minister of Education, Cabinet spokesperson asserts. Staying on track. Post-disaster rebuilding will not derail government's reform agenda, President assures. Pledges to maintain strict financial discipline in the management of DITWA donations. Farming revival. Government to increase minimum purchasing prices for selected paddy varieties in a bid to support paddy farmers.
Kalin baby soap රුපියල් 90කට. Kalin baby podi හැමෝටමයි.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9 on Derana News Channel, Sri Lanka's most trusted news source. I'm Derana, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. We begin with your top story. Following criticism against the new education reforms, the Cabinet of Ministers has decided to postpone the Grade 6 curriculum reform until next year. However, Cabinet spokesperson Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa announced that Grade 1 reforms will be implemented as planned from this year. The Cabinet spokesperson also asserted that Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya will continue to serve as the Minister of Education.
The government planned new education reforms for Grade 1 and 6 this year. Recently, concerns arose over errors and inappropriate content in the Grade 6 module, prompting protest from trade unions, religious leaders, the opposition and civil society. In response, the Cabinet has decided to implement the Grade 1 reforms as scheduled while postponing the Grade 6 reforms to until next year. We acknowledge that there has been some confusion in society regarding certain content in Grade 6 modules, especially the English language module. As a government, we believe reforms cannot be fully implemented if there is even the slightest doubt and therefore accept that amendments are necessary. The CID and the Ministry of Education conducted separate investigations regarding the Grade 6 module. Based on the CID report, the Ministry's preliminary report and discussions between the President and education professionals, the Cabinet made the following decisions. The Grade 1 education reforms will proceed as planned. The Grade 6 modules, especially the English language module, will be reassessed and its implementation has been postponed until 2027. Based on the findings of investigations into the Grade 6 English language module, the Academic Affairs Board of the National Institute of Education will take necessary disciplinary action against the responsible officials.
විශේෂයෙන්ම CID පරීක්ෂණයක් ආරම්භ කරලා දැන් සති කිහිපයක් වෙනවා. ඊළඟට අධ්‍යාපන අමාත්‍යාංශයේ අභ්‍යන්තර පරීක්ෂණයක් සිද්ධ වුණා. ඇයි මේ පුද්ගලයා හෝ කණ්ඩායමව හෙළිදරව් කරන්නේ නැත්තේ? ඇයි අත්අඩංගුවට ගන්න නැත්තේ? අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනීම හෝ නොගැනීම.
The CID will proceed with arrest after presenting their findings to the court. The NIE will take action within its jurisdiction.
ඒ කියන්නේ ඔවුන්ව හඳුනාගෙන එළිදරව් කරන්න බැරි මොකක් හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවද? කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ.
There's no issue. The head of the NIE has resigned. Investigations continue against other officials regarding negligence during the development of curricula. The ministry will disclose their names in future.
එතකොට මේ පෙළපොත් ටික මුද්‍රණය කරා නම් එක පිටුවකට දල වශයෙන් කොච්චර පාඩුවක් රජයට සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවද?
දැන් ලාභයක් පාඩුවක් වුණාද කියන එක ගණන් හදන්නට බෑ.
We cannot calculate a loss or profit at this moment as the issue does not affect the entire textbook. Regarding questions about Vimal Weerawansa, our decision will not affect his satyagraha as he is demanding the dismissal of the Prime Minister, Minister of Education. His decision to continue the satyagraha is personal. No one will intervene. He will have to continue indefinitely.
එමෙතුමා දැන් කැබිනට් සංශෝධනයක් ගැනත් ඔය සමගම සාකච්ඡා අභ්‍යන්තරයේ සිද්ධ වෙනවා කියලා ආරංචි වෙනවා. කිසිම කැබිනට් සංශෝධනයක් සිදු කරන්නේ නැහැ.
There will be no cabinet shuffle. The Prime Minister will not resign and she will remain the Minister of Education. All doubts will be clarified once the opposition presents the no confidence motion. We anticipate the debate to take place on January 22nd and 23rd.
ඔබේ සම හඳුනාගෙන ඖෂධීය ශාකසාරමය forever face wash එකක් භාවිතා කරන්න.
Education trade unions have proposed the appointment of a representative committee comprising educators, trade unionists and other stakeholders to oversee the implementation of the new education reforms. The proposal was made during a discussion with the President and Prime Minister this afternoon at the Presidential Secretariat. Representatives of several education trade unions arrived at the Presidential Secretariat this afternoon for discussions regarding the education reforms. The meeting was attended by President Anuradha Dissanayake and Prime Minister and Minister of Education Dr. Harini Amarasuriya.
The Education Minister was also present for the discussion. We pointed out the issue that had arisen. In the end, the President decided to postpone the Grade 6 education reforms originally planned for this year until 2027. However, there is still no clarity about the long-term goals of these reforms, where they plan to lead our children and what outcomes they expect. We have called for the appointment of a committee of investigation. The reform should be implemented after taking everyone's opinion into consideration. That is what we stand for. We expect proper education reforms to be implemented following inclusive discussions.
ආණ්ඩුව හොඳයිද නැද්ද කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ අපිට තියෙන්නේ. අපිට තියෙන මේ රටේ අධ්‍යාපනයේ මේ ඇති වෙලා තියෙන අර්බුදයට විසඳුම් අවශ්‍යයි.
We had in-depth discussions and the shortcomings were clearly highlighted. This is not a reversal of educational transformation in any way, only the curriculum reform is being postponed. After carefully considering the positive ideas and suggestions of experts, the reforms will be revised and implemented from next year.
Meanwhile, several trade unions that were not part of the discussion commented on the reforms separately.
We are pleased with the government's decision. We hope the government will realize the importance of considering everyone's opinion and move towards successful education reforms in 2027. First, we thank the government for reversing half of the education reforms that they were about to implement arbitrarily. However, the government's egotistical decision to hold Grade 6 reforms and implement Grade 1 reforms unchanged will only create further unrest. This is not practically feasible. All reforms must be withdrawn immediately. We will not abandon our fight until then.
The Satyagraha initiated in front of the Education Ministry demanding the withdrawal of the new education reforms concluded this afternoon following the government's decision to postpone the Grade 6 curriculum reform until 2027. However, leader of the National Freedom Front Vimal Weerawansa vowed to continue to pursue Prime Minister Dr. Haranya Amarasuriya's resignation as the Minister of Education. A satyagraha launched by leader of the National Freedom Front Vimal Weerawansa in front of the Ministry of Education continued through the course of last night. The campaign continued for the second day today. Chairman of the Surakimu Sri Lanka organisation, Venerable Pahiyangala Anandasagara Thera, Venerable Battaramulle Seelarathana Thera and several other political representatives declared support for the campaign.
She was a colleague of ours at university. She has never held any administrative position within the university system. She has not even run her own department. However, she was conferred the portfolio of Minister of Education and Higher Education, an undeserving honour.
Meanwhile, Weerawansa was informed of the government's decision to postpone the implementation of education reforms for Grade 6 until next year. Against this backdrop, a group demanded that the satyagraha be called off, leading to a tense standoff. Police personnel were deployed to the scene to control the unrest. Subsequently, civil society representatives led by Vimal Weerawansa concluded the satyagraha.
We managed to have the education reforms postponed at least until 2027. This is what we demanded. We consider this a major victory. Do not try to implement these reforms in secret. If so, the people of this country will respond even more strongly. We conclude this fight for now, but this is only a comma, not a full stop. Yes, our main purpose was to stop the reforms from being implemented. Even though the government says education reforms will be implemented in 2027, it will not be possible. If they attempt to implement the same reforms, their efforts will be in vain. That is why they withdrew these reforms. That was the main purpose. The matter of the Education Ministry is separate. She has to be removed. She hid behind the reforms for this long, but now that the reforms have been withdrawn, she cannot hide any longer.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says the government is responsible for ensuring that every student has access to facilities such as smart devices required to access certain content included in the learning modules introduced under the new education reforms. He made this remark during a public rally in Kolonava yesterday.
A public rally of Samagi Jana Balawega was held in the Kolonna electorate of Ratnapura yesterday under the patronage of party leader of opposition Sajith Premadasa.
When we hear the phrase a transformative change in education, we expect reforms that would enable our children to receive an education on par with European countries and the United States. However, today, children's right to education has been violated and profaned. The education system requires reforms. Sectors such as robotics, artificial intelligence and information technology should be prioritized within the scope of education. None of these sectors are currently prioritized. While focusing on these sectors, history should be made a core subject. This balance needs to be understood. The usage of smart devices has been recommended to school children through various modules. How many students have access to a smart device? Under the education reform program, the government is also responsible for providing smart devices equipped with necessary safety protocols to every student in the country.
Chief incumbent of Mihintale Rajamaha Vihara asserts that the president should seek the chief prelate's forgiveness over the controversial remarks made by Minister Lal Kantha. The chief incumbent also lodged an official complaint with the Criminal Investigation Department over the defamatory statements made against him.
Those shared by Minister of Agriculture, Livestock, Land and Irrigation Lal Kantha during an event on the 10th January sparked controversy. As the minister's remarks gained sharp criticisms across diverse groups, another post shared on his social media platforms drew significant denunciation from bhikkhu organizations. Minister Lal Kantha has posted yet another post on his official Facebook account that appears to incite hostile towards the Buddhist clergy. The sentiments expressed in this post reflect a deeply rooted anti-Buddhist and anti-bhikkhu disposition, which is evident not only in his words but also in his conduct. Similar attitudes have been observed throughout the course of his political career. At the moment, it appears that the true character and underlying intentions of the entire party are becoming increasingly visible to the public. Against this backdrop, Venerable Walawahanguna Vave Dhammaratana Thera arrived at the Criminal Investigation Department today to lodge a complaint over Minister Lal Kantha's remarks. Meanwhile, the chief incumbent of the Mihintale Rajamaha Vihara convened a press briefing to respond to the remarks made by Minister Lal Kantha. Minister Lal Kantha is referred to as the Candy Killer due to the grave consequences that followed Cyclone Ditwa. It is reported that at least 800 lives were lost in the Kandy and Matale districts as he failed to fulfill his ministerial responsibilities. The minister also bears responsibility for oversight in matters related to irrigation management. Taken together, these circumstances provide sufficient ground for the initiation of legal proceedings. He further claimed that our stance is misogynistic. We reject this assertion as we harbour no hatred towards any individual or group. Our concerns were voiced solely in response to the education reforms. We consistently appeal to the government to refrain from implementing these reforms under such conditions. Following repeated requests, the President made the decision to postpone this implementation of the proposed reforms until next year, for which we express our sincere appreciation. Given the gravity of the situation and the responsibilities entrusted to him as the President, we believe it would be appropriate for the President to meet with the Chief Prelate and to seek their forgiveness over these matters.
Welcome back to First at 9. Now taking you to more local news, the Cabinet of Ministers has approved the increasing of minimum purchasing prices for Samba and Kiri Samba paddy in a bid to support local farmers. Meanwhile, in another decision, over 26,000 public sector vacancies, including 23,344 teacher positions, were cleared for recruitment. With that, here's more on some key decisions taken during this week's Cabinet meeting.
As part of measures to support paddy farmers, Cabinet approval was granted to revise minimum purchasing prices for selected paddy varieties. While the minimum purchasing price of Nadu paddy will remain at 120 rupees per kilogram, the price of Samba paddy has been increased from 125 to 130 rupees and Kiri Samba from 132 to 140 rupees. Cabinet also approved proposals to lease underutilized state lands and properties to suitable investors. These include Stage 2 lands belonging to the State Plantation Corporation, Janata State Development Board and Alkadu Plantation Company, the 40.48 hectare Mavaralavatta land and tea factory in Mathura, and 1,541 hectares of land at Kondachi Estate, currently under the Cashew Corporation. In the industrial and tourism sector, Cabinet approved calling for expressions of interest to develop selected locations within the Palavatta sugar factory as tourist attractions under a public-private partnership model. In healthcare, Cabinet approved entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Government of India to construct a 4-story medical ward complex at the Mullaitivu District General Hospital using an Indian grant of 600 million rupees. Cabinet further approved the registration of qualified consulting institutions for 2 years to accelerate reconstruction of road and railway infrastructure damaged by Cyclone Ditwa in view of staff shortages at implementing agencies. Approval was also granted to settle 23.87 billion rupees owed to the State Pharmaceutical Corporation for medical supplies for the period from 2018 to 2023 to be paid in installments within this year. Meanwhile, Cabinet approved filling 26,095 public sector vacancies, including 23,344 teacher recruitments and vacancies across ministries, provincial councils and commissions.
President Andrew Dissanayake vows all post-disaster rebuilding projects will be undertaken without deviating from the reforms and policies implemented by the government prior to Cyclone Ditwa. The President made these remarks during the inauguration ceremony of the Rebuilding Sri Lanka National Programme. The head of state further vowed to uphold strict financial discipline in the utilisation of donations received by the Rebuilding Sri Lanka Fund.
The Rebuilding Sri Lanka program was launched to mobilise funds for post-Cyclone Ditwa rehabilitation and recovery. Accordingly, many local, foreign, public and private donors provided financial assistance to the Rebuilding Sri Lanka National Programme. A presidential task force led by Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya was also established to provide strategic leadership, coordination and oversight for Rebuilding Sri Lanka. In this context, the inauguration ceremony of the Rebuilding Sri Lanka National Programme was held this morning under the patronage of President Andrew Dissanayake at the BMICH. A minute silence was observed in memory of those who lost their lives due to the impact of Cyclone Ditwa. Subsequently, a website comprising the registry of donors that contributed to the initiative was made online.
The year 2025 was transformative for many sectors. The rule of law was firmly established, the efficiency of state services was strengthened, political culture underwent meaningful reform, and notable progress was achieved in both economic and educational transformation. It was during this period of national transformation that we were confronted with an unexpected crisis. Some believed this crisis would undermine our agenda. However, we recognized that our agenda represented the path towards sustainable development and resolved without hesitation not to abandon it under any circumstances. Our present priority is to confront this crisis without deviating from the reforms and policies already put in place. The scale of destruction has been substantial. Approximately 6,000 homes have been completely destroyed, while nearly 110,000 have suffered partial damage. In addition, at least 10,000 houses in high-risk areas have been deemed uninhabitable, with assessments still ongoing in certain regions. Based on current evaluations, we anticipate the need to construct a minimum of 20,000 new homes. Even prior to the crisis, the 2026 national budget included plans to build 31,000 houses. However, in light of the increased demand resulting from the disaster, a total of 50,000 new homes are now required. According to the estimate prepared in collaboration with the World Bank, Cyclone Ditwa has caused direct damages amounting to $4.1 billion. The estimated cost of our own rebuilding project stands at approximately $2.8 billion. I will address the disparity between the World Bank figure and our figure. These are only the projects identified to date. Further assessments are underway. The crisis caused a shock to an economy that was steadily gaining momentum. However, as a government, we have resolved to transform adversity into an opportunity and rebuild the country better than before. Our foremost responsibility is to uplift the livelihoods of those affected by this disaster to a higher level than before. To this end, we will construct between 20,000 and 25,000 new houses, each valued at approximately 5 million rupees. While some officials point out that the value of some destroyed houses did not reach that figure, our position remains firm. We are committed to providing housing that offers dignity, independence and opportunity rather than merely replicating previous conditions. Furthermore, we will provide 500,000 rupee grants for the 110,000 partially damaged homes without formal assessments. Although some argue that certain houses did not suffer sufficient damage to warrant a grant of that magnitude, our intention is to enable families to undertake additional improvements or expansions, thereby enhancing long-term resilience. The next phase of our response will focus on permanently upgrading temporary constructions. Arrangements have also been made to rehabilitate damaged infrastructure across affected regions. Throughout this process, we will assume accountability for all donations and uphold strict financial discipline.
Now, the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment has provided benefits exceeding 1 billion rupees for the welfare of Sri Lankan migrant workers and their families during 2025. From January to November 2025, the SLBFE granted assistance amounting to 964.3 million rupees for a total of 326,246 migrant workers. Additionally, during 2025, the Bureau contributed 397 million rupees to provide free insurance coverage for 318,209 workers departing overseas for employment. In a statement, the Foreign Employment Bureau noted that scholarships totaling 50.88 million rupees were provided to 1,628 school-going children of migrant workers, while 50.25 million rupees were spent on providing school equipment for a further 4,304 children. Meanwhile, steps have also been taken to initiate legal proceedings on behalf of individuals who lodged complaints with the Bureau after falling victim to foreign employment fraud, resulting in the recovery of more than 374 million rupees. A total of 311,139 Sri Lankans migrated for employment abroad during the past year. The U.S. Embassy in Sri Lanka announced an additional $2 million in humanitarian assistance for communities affected by Cyclone Ditwa, bringing total U.S. support to $4 million. The funding builds on aid released within 72 hours of the cyclone's landfall, highlighting the United States' rapid response. U.S. assistance is providing emergency food, clean water, shelter support and recovery help across some of the hardest hit districts, while partner organizations such as the World Food Programme and World Vision ensure aid reaches families rapidly and responsibly. Marking yet another milestone as Sri Lanka's leading media brand, TV Derana was conferred the title of Super Brand at the prestigious Super Brands 2025 awards ceremony. TV Derana was the only media brand to be recognized as a super this year.
The Super Brand 2025 awards ceremony, organized by renowned business magazine LMD together with Super Brands Global, was held last evening in Colombo. Out of 560 brands representing several sectors, 28 were awarded the prestigious Super Brand accolade. TV Derana too was recognized as one of the leading brands in Sri Lanka. Derana was the only media brand to be conferred the Super Brand accolade. Director Chief Marketing Officer Tushara Pereira and Senior General Manager of the Marketing Division Lakmal Mudalige accepted the award on behalf of TV Derana.
Welcome back. Now in your business news, the Colombo Bulls closed in a negative territory today as a result of price losses in counters such as John Keel's Holdings, Colombo Dockyard and DFCC Bank. The benchmark ASPI declined marginally by 0.71 points to close at 23,607.8, while the more liquid S&P Sri Lanka 20 decreased by 0.12% to end the day at 6,494.76. Market turnover was 4.9 billion rupees. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net buyers, purchasing shares worth 22 million rupees. With that, here's a look at today's exchange rates. That's all for tonight from First at 9. For the latest developments around the clock, stay in touch with Other Derana, the Sri Lankan news brand of international excellence. Thank you for joining. Stay safe and have a great night.
across the nation and around the world. This is Sri Lanka's #1 news source, Ada Derana.